this is a great opportunity to learn from each other, and a lot of us have been around a very, very long time. And I can tell you, just sitting here and listening to the first three speakers, we've got lots of work to do where I'm at, just to catch up to speed to what these guys are doing. Most of you know that our role at the World Council of Credit Unions is to do just a couple of things. One is to help create credit union movements anywhere on the globe that they're wanted and desired at, and we've attempted to carry out that mission. And at the same time, we're the international voice, if you will, the representation for credit unions throughout the world. And we're finding today that many attributes of finance has a global perspective to it, as opposed to a local perspective. And I'll get into that in just a few minutes. I should tell you that, that this morning we had an earlier meeting in Bill's shop, and we began talking about credit unions about 8 o'clock this morning, 8:30. So we really got into this stuff. And Bill mentioned a moment ago something that I think you will find very interesting. Bill mentioned that throughout the financial crisis, credit unions here in the U.S. had no need for bailout, had no desire for bailout, didn't need monies from the government to operate, and for a very good reason. Obviously, we're running our business for a different reason. We're not chasing profit. We're not in derivatives. Our business are people like yourselves, helping you realize your goal, your dream, whatever it is that you've got to have, and if there's a financial perspective to it, then obviously the credit unions are the folks that you want to see. Well, that is true here in the U.S. It is also true everywhere else in the world. No credit union movement anywhere took bailout funds from any government. And that's a pretty broad statement. That's a big statement to be able to make. And it's a big statement about what the world looks like after a financial crisis that it has just gone through. And if you recall, we lost companies that I think many of us had grown up on. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. You look at AIG, who barely scraped through. But companies who you would have guessed never would have gone out of business for a lot of reasons. But credit unions survived it, and survived it for a very good reason. And that is our model of doing business and who we do business for is much different than the competitors that we're confronted with, and for different reasons than the competitors that we're confronted with. In the world, there's about 49,000 credit unions. There's 184 million members in 92 countries. And if we add to that the financial cooperatives, and here I'm talking about the European cooperative banks, if we add those in, if we add the self-help groups in India, if we add the rural credit cooperatives, and all of these are financial cooperatives. Every one of them. If we add all those together, we're talking about 876 million members, or 876 million people who benefit from financial cooperatives around the world. Now Liz has given us questions that we can respond to, and this seems to be a good place to talk about at least one of those, and that is an example of what takes place when you begin to create these types of entities that are self-help and owned and democratically controlled. About 5 years ago, we began our operation in Afghanistan. Not a very safe place to be, but a place without any type of financial structure anywhere in the country. There were no banks, there were no credit unions, there were nothing. And our role was to help create some of these, particularly at the local level, at the rural level. And our plan was to go in, have meetings at the village level in 4 or 5 different places over about a 2-month time frame, and then bring the villagers to us, the village leadership to us, and then we talk about the next step. Well, we did that at the first meeting. We went and we explained what a credit union was, how it operated, who had benefited, who run it. We did it at the second meeting, and it worked really well. Third meeting, we only got about 10 minutes into the meeting. And it was a meeting very much like this. And someone stood up and said, "We'd like to start our credit union tonight." We brought our money. And we thought, whoa, what's going on here? And as we began to ask questions of what prompted this, well, a couple of things. And it's an answer to the question, I think, or at least an attempt at an answer to the question that Paul raised. One, they were very, very pleased to know that the government had no hand in it. They were going to run it. They were going to make decisions about it. They were going to serve each other. They were going to make decisions about each other. And this thing about voting, one member, one vote. The toughest thing that we dealt with was, guys, look, the deal breaker is that women have to have equal representation here. And they had a little bit of difficulty with that. And we thought, well, okay, it wasn't going to be easy. And they went in the corner and they met for about 30 minutes and they came back and said, what does that mean? And and my flippant answer was, ask the gals. But what it meant was one member, one vote meant women played an equal role. They needed to be on the official family, so on the board. Yet they had to be members. They had to be voting members. Within moments, the answer was, okay, let's do this. So the credit union became much more than just a local financial institution. It became kind of the pivotal point for the village making the turnaround. 18 of those now exist with 26 branches. All of them are run by the Afghans, not by us. Not by us. But to be able to do that over and over again gives you an example of what very simple principles mean to people who are looking to help themselves. So a little bit of structure, a little bit of opportunity, a little bit of ability to help yourselves is essentially what we're exporting at World Council in terms of developing credit unions. One of the questions that we had was, where best do credit unions flourish at? And I think it's pretty easy. It's where there's a market gap. It's pretty easy, and that happens a lot, believe it or not. When you look around the world, for example, and it's happening now in China, there's almost no financial institutions outside of the major cities. They've all left the rural areas. So if you're an older adult, if you're in a farm community, you don't have access to financial services because the bank knows what everybody else knows, and it takes economy of scale. And if you get economy of scale by being in concentrated population, and so they've deserted these areas, and credit unions have easily filled in behind them. So we see great development in places we didn't think credit unions would exist before. And speaking of that, and this will be my last point, when we think about places that credit unions wouldn't exist, and I tell people that if you wanted to take my lunch money in a bet, you could have bet me 5 years ago that there would be a credit union movement in Russia. And I will tell you today that there's not one credit union movement in Russia, there's 5. So they're getting it, and they're getting it really quickly. Now, ultimately, they'll get them all put together. But right now, there's 5 that operate. They all got about 150 credit unions that are in them. And there's a new law that's being put together, and that will push some of them together. But it's not a place I would have selected as a possible safe haven for credit unions to develop. I would not have picked Brazil, for example, who underwent hyperinflation. Not too many turbulent years ago, they couldn't get savings in there, couldn't make loans in there. Today, their growth rate over the last 5 years in membership has been double digit. Last year it was 21%. Big growth, big look, see, and selection of credit unions as the way in which to do business in the future. I'll stop there, be happy to answer questions later on, look forward to it.